All right. Welcome back, everybody. It's the Desert Harvest podcast with my partner in crime, Oren Molovinsky. Oren, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And I gotta just tell you, Warren, I'm kind of sick of your whining. I'm just telling you that right now.
You're such a wino, Pete.
Oh, you say that like it's a bad thing, crying out loud. Well, since we're doing all this wine talk, maybe we talk a little bit about Arizona wine. And I'm going to tell you, when I was a kid, which is a million years ago now, when you said the term wine and even the United States, I think people might be a little bit like, well, the United States doesn't make good wine. And then as I got older, well, California, started to get some respect. And then as I went along further, maybe the Northwest. But I've been an Arizona resident now for an awfully long time. And I believe we are producing some excellent wines here. Would you agree?
It's so amazing to me. I didn't know anything about Arizona wine before I moved to Arizona, and even once I moved to Arizona, I knew very little about Arizona wine. I just thought, hey, I'm closer to California now.
Right.
Um, and when I opened Farm Boy, I committed to like only featuring Arizona wines and beers and spirits. And with that, it just opened up this whole world. It was just shocking to me how not just how many wine regions there are here,
Right.
but how good the wines are. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and just sitting out now, having visited some of these the tasting rooms and the wineries, and obviously having served them, meeting people at these wineries that are there from California. They're
Yeah.
visiting here from California. I think that's pretty
Yes.
strong.
That's super strong. And I will be honest, I would not have the education about Arizona wines on my own. I got my education from you. And because of you, not only have I learned about all this amazing wine that's being produced in Arizona, but there's really extraordinary places to go as well. I mean, one of the pleasures of going to Northern California is to see these vineyards and to have an experience that is not just about the wine, but the ambiance and all the rest of it. So, I mean, Arizona's firing on all cylinders, in my opinion, when it comes to this. But maybe we take a step back and let me just ask you some questions about growing the grapes in this region. Like, as a
Mhm.
farmer, from a farmer's perspective, I think the average person might say, how is it possible that the Sonoran Desert in Arizona, more broadly speaking, could produce a climate in which, good grapes for wine could be grown? Can you speak a little
Well,
bit about our terroir, so to speak?
yeah, absolutely. And I want to start with a little, I'll call it an anecdote, but um, running fine dining restaurants for many years, especially out on the East Coast, a big deal was for sommeliers, and I would have sommeliers working for me who we would send out to what they called Pinot Camp in
Mm,
Oregon.
yes.
And uh, the the growers, the winemakers out in Willamette Valley and all those great Pinot areas would uh, would basically band together and invite sommeliers from all over the country, and it's this massive thing. But the one thing I remember, I never went, and I always wanted my Psalms to go. But when they went, they talked about the agriculture.
Yes.
It wasn't, these
Right.
guys were all, and gals, they were all farmers.
Yeah.
So when you speak of terroir and the agricultural part of growing grapes, when and you've met many of these growers
Yes.
here and
Hmm.
winemakers, they are geeky about the farming part of it.
Yes.
They are farmers that are really focused on the soil. And so I think it's not just the Arizona terroir. We have a incredible, very dynamic climate. As you know, like if you visit Arizona or if you live here, obviously, what I always knew, because I used to visit here, my wife's a native, but I used to visit and we would always go north.
Hmm.
So, you're here in Phoenix. basically at sea level, right? And
Right.
then you start climbing up towards Flagstaff or Show Low into the White Mountains or wherever, and then you start hitting all these wine regions because the elevation just shoots up. So we go from, this desert, low desert here in Phoenix and even Tucson, and then go into this, there's a huge swath of Arizona that's at 5,000 feet, and that
Right.
seems to be where the
Yeah.
winemaking is taking place. So we may just be fortunate that there's in northern Arizona and southern Arizona, as
Yeah.
we know now, there's a lot of 5,000 foot,
Yeah. That's right. That's
um,
right.
you know, basically hills, plateaus, mountains, whatever they are, and that's where the wine's being made. So it's really cool because you still get the intense sun here.
Hmm.
And so I think from what I've learned is we have um, the right rolling hills at those altitudes. We have an incredible climate for grapes. And we actually, believe it or not, for those who don't know Arizona very well, we have a lot of water for agriculture.
Hmm.
I mean, the state is an agricultural state. We've got this incredible water reserve system that comes down from the mountains. And then southern Arizona has an incredible amount of water in those higher elevations. So while you hear about droughts in the Rio Grande and or not Rio, the Colorado
Right. Right.
and all these issues with water here, um, the one thing we have good amount of for is water. Now, some regions are more sparse, like we've heard about, um, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. But in a nutshell, the terroir and the climate allow for a thicker skinned grape.
Right. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
as we bring winemakers on, we'll hear more about that and that not just the flavor benefits of that and the quality of the wine, but also the health benefits of that wine.
Yeah, when it comes to the types of grapes, I mean, some of the places, and at some point in time, hopefully we get, Phil and Kim from Deep Sky Vineyards, and
Mhm.
so many of the people that we've met and become friends with over the years. But Malbec grapes seem to be particularly well suited for the region, and Phil and Kim have a great story about
Mhm.
their vineyard. We'll leave that story to them when they want to come on. However, uh, there's some relationship even between where we sit relative to the equator and where certain regions of Argentina sit relative
Well,
to the
and interestingly, Malbec is a that's a varietal that was, of course, bought over. Everything came from the old world. So it's a French varietal, but they modified the name, and I can't remember what the varietal is, if it's a Bordeaux or what, but it's
Right.
a French varietal that got rebranded as Malbec in Argentina.
Hmm.
And yeah, so Mendoza, Argentina is that line
Right.
in the southern hemisphere, and Wilcox, Arizona is that line in the northern hemisphere.
That's so
And
crazy.
so they went for it. And I think, she the Asmunsen's Kim especially is she talks a lot about farming. If you go to Deep Sky Vineyards website,
Hmm.
and subscribe to their newsletter, it is a farming newsletter.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then they mention, what live music's going to be at their tasting room. But it is geeky and it's so interesting because they write very well.
Yes.
And so they talk about an experimental vine they're working with, an experimental grape varietal, why it worked, why it didn't work, what they learned from it. So in a sense, they're recording they're putting down on their website and in their newsletter this kind of like education on what it's
Yeah.
like to grow grapes. And my experience with vineyards uh, is very large scale, but here I just find that they're really, because they're focused on that type of agricultural, they're conserving water, um, getting a thicker skin on the grape, that's what's setting us apart. And while our wine regions may not be well known outside of Arizona yet, they are very distinct. And I think, you know, in 10 years, we'll be looking back and saying, oh, is that a Napa or Sonoma, or is it an Elgin or a
Yeah,
Wilcox,
yeah, how interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that the Arizona reputation, the business of winemaking, I'm sure, includes self-promotion and, calling attention to yourself. And that is it's a fight in a world of California dominated imagery for wine in this country, in the Northwest not being far behind it. So I'm
Hmm.
sure there's a business issue to be solved. From a quality perspective, I think that the wines that are being done here have extraordinary complexity, extraordinary quality that um, as the story gets out, as the story gets told, I think the 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 reputation and the product will catch up to itself. I think that is
Well,
part
yeah,
of what will happen in the next, and I think in short order.
there's a lot of, yeah, I agree. And it's interesting when we speak of varietals. So I mean, and I think I should preface this by saying I enjoy drinking wine, but I am not by
Right,
any
right, right. Yes.
by any
Yeah.
stretch a connoisseur, or, well, I can't tell you. I know what I like,
Right.
but I'm not that guy. I always,
You
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 know,
can't tell what the zip code is that the grape was grown in, and
yeah,
yeah.
and if it's got elements of tobacco, I know what I like, and I'm not very picky, but but I do have varietals. So for instance,
Yeah.
California wines, I'm a Zinfandel guy.
Okay.
I've just gotten into the old vine Zinfandel. What I found here is, when you don't know a wine region, it's like you go for safety, right? It's like when you go to a
Yeah.
new bar and grill
Right.
and you just order the chicken wings, right? Like it's like I'm not going to go nuts. I'm not ordering the Chateaubriand yet. I want
Right.
to see what this place is all about. Let me get something deep fried first. So, the Cabernet, the Chardonnay, um, the Sauvignon Blanc. These are safe bets when you're in a new wine region, when
Yeah.
you're exploring, right? Like if I was in Texas, and I've traveled to Texas a
Sure.
lot, and I was going to drink a local wine, I would go for one of those varietals because
Right.
I know I'm not, at least I'm going to get something somewhat familiar. So of course, but what I've experienced here in Arizona is some really cool varietals that I just love. Like
Yeah. Give me an
anyone,
example. What's
yeah,
something? What's a varietal that surprised you?
Morvedra.
Okay.
Morvedra, it's spelled Mourvedre.
Okay.
I was first introduced to it by James at
Oh, James
Rune
Callahan.
Wines,
Right.
one of the most talented winemakers I think I've ever met,
Sure.
and certainly here in the state. And just like, charting a new course, he's down in Sonoyta, and I know we'll have him on the show. Like we've
Yeah.
got to. He's such
Yeah.
a great guy. And but he introduced me to the Morvedra, and I just like, that's the gift I give everyone. In fact, my wife Diana's brother uh, lives and has a vineyard in it's not Sonoma, but it's a major winemaking region in
Okay.
California.
Yeah.
So he's actually a winemaker. He handed it over to his son,
Right.
but he makes terrific wines. In fact, I have three of them that they sent us for my birthday that I haven't even opened yet. But these are $100 bottles.
Nice.
Um, when I looked online, um, now I sent him very boldly and his wife
Right.
some Arizona wines. I sent him a Ravedra. I sent him the Rune Wild Syrah,
Right.
which
Yes.
is like James's biggest wine. And
Right.
I've never been a Syrah guy, but that is just off the charts. And I've
Mm.
and that seems to be a very hot varietal out here in Arizona. Like most of the vineyards or wineries are producing a Syrah. And then I sent them the Malbec from Deep
Mm.
Sky, of course.
Right.
And they were blown away.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when I sent them to them, I didn't realize that they actually had a vineyard. So, because
Oh
it's
my goodness.
Diana's half brother, and
Yeah,
I've only met him once.
right.
So when I met him, we were talking about wines and da da da, and he's like, "Oh, I
Turns out
live in
he's a
wine country."
winemaker.
He's a
Yeah,
winemaker, and here
yeah.
I'm the schmuck who sent them, 3 bottles. But he sent me, him and his wife sent me pictures of them drinking it. I said, "This is fantastic. We never knew
And that's
Arizona had such
and
great wine."
that's what I want us to like. That's part of what I'm excited about the podcast for, because look, if you're a wine drinker right now, and if you're a wine drinker in Arizona, you got no excuse. I mean, these wines are not hard to find. Deep Sky for me was one of those experiences that I really couldn't believe how good it was. I don't know what
Mhm.
I was expecting, but when I had the variety of the different wines that Deep Sky puts out. I mean, each one was better than the next. And obviously, James, I felt the same way. I couldn't believe the quality that I was tasting that was being, it's a few hundred miles away from me. So I gotta figure, Warren, I mean, I don't have a sophisticated palate. I'm no sommelier, I'm not an expert, but I'm somebody who has enough time drinking a variety of wines at a variety of price points that I recognize something excellent. So if I recognize it as excellent, other people surely are as well. So have you seen people choosing Arizona as a place to come and build their wine business as opposed to, there are people that can do whatever they want, wherever they want, and yet,
Sure.
they pick Arizona as opposed
Mhm.
to. So have you observed any of that here?
I think it's interesting. So Sonoyta and Elgin, which I'm more familiar with in southern Arizona, south of
Right.
Tucson, it's about, from the Tucson International Airport, 45 minutes and you're
Yeah.
drinking wine,
Right.
right? And um, I looked recently, and there are 25 vineyards
Wow.
and wineries in a very small area. Like, I mean, relatively speaking,
Right. Right.
within maybe 30 square miles or so.
Hmm.
Um, I think when I first started interacting with those wineries, there were maybe 8 or 9.
Yes. Right.
So obviously there's an influx, and they don't seem to be getting, like, it's not like a bunch of schlocky wineries. I mean,
Right. Right.
these are hardcore. I mean, the OGs there are, Deep Sky, Rune, Dos Cabezas,
Yeah.
which has been around for a long time. Uh, now you have, I mean, there's so many. I know I'm leaving a bunch out, but um,
Well, there's over 100 in the state.
Callahan, yeah,
Callahan. Yeah. Yeah.
and he's like the godfather of
Right.
Southern
Right.
Arizona
Yeah.
wine.
Yeah.
And I noticed I think it's his wife, it might be his daughter, but one of the Callahans runs the Visit Sonoyta Elgin wine country, like their chamber. So I thought it might be interesting to have her on too,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
who she could
Absolutely.
speak to what's really happening in the wine industry. But yeah, from a visitor standpoint, um, or I'm sorry, from wineries and vineyards moving in, I know that we can bring on probably 50% of these vineyards and wineries that have opened in the last decade here in Arizona.
Right.
And I'm sure that everyone's of that those would say, yes, we were looking at California, or yes,
Yeah.
we were looking at X. But when we saw what was happening here, we decided we had to do this in Arizona. I know Carlson Creek, which we did a couple wine dinners with them
Right.
back in the day. They specifically moved here from California
Yeah.
to, start their vineyard and winery. And I think that was very intentional. I think, look, it's economics, right? You have the you have the climate, you have the terrain, you have the terroir, um, and you have much lower real estate costs.
Yeah. Without a doubt. I mean, there's an economic incentive on that end, but it's such a capital intensive project that like nobody was going to put something nobody's going to build that project if it's destined to fail. I look at someone like Maynard of Tool, right? And he's built
Hmm.
this great tasting room down in Scottsdale. I haven't been up to,
The one in
to
Cottonwood, my
yeah,
sister-in-law was up there recently and said it was just off the charts amazing.
that's what I've seen pictures of it. I follow them on LinkedIn. Um, and I saw the documentary. What's that documentary called
But
for
I think
Maynard?
it's Blood to Wine.
Blood to Wine. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
that's
that's
a
when he was with Arizona Stronghold. Now he's
oh,
with Merkin.
right. And
Yeah.
he probably wouldn't like me to say this, but I think of him now more as a winemaker than as a musician.
Yeah.
You know,
I
and
think
that,
he'd probably appreciate
yeah,
that.
maybe he would like that, given his fame as a rock and roller. But anyway, I think what's important for people to hear, that might think, oh, the wine in Arizona. What are you guys actually talking about? There's extraordinary product being produced here. There's extraordinary investment, and the um, I think what will happen uh, quickly is people will not just as they come and they see or they taste this incredible wines and then they'll go and they'll see these places that it will
Mhm.
be this really we talk about the virtuous cycle a lot. People will come, they'll have those as destinations. We're going to talk a ton about the culinary scene in Arizona and all the extraordinary culinary talent here. And you know people who came for the wine will find out we have great restaurants, just the way that people might come for the restaurants will then find out we have great wine. Um,
Well,
and when
there's
I
so much
talk,
more to do here,
oh, I mean,
too.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I mean, but you know, you're coming for all the wonderful things that Arizona's always offered, spring training,
right, yes, right, right,
Grand Canyon, hiking, wonderful weather in the winter, you know, and then now to be able to add to that, oh shit, I can go to all these different wine regions within a couple hours of
right.
Scottsdale.
And what I know that people don't know is how cool the places are. Like I know that people aren't thinking if I head down to Cochise County that there's destination places that are going to feel really cool. It's not um it's increasingly becoming refined. Although thank God for your place. I know you have a place that people can stay down in that Sonoita region, but there's not enough. I mean, there's not enough places to go see, and that will be, I'm sure, part of this economic virtuous cycle. I mean, yes, I'll always stay at your bed and breakfast down there, but the region could use some more spots for people to come
Yeah,
down and enjoy.
I think right now for some of these area, wine regions, you really need to figure out how to get there, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not so easy. I mean, now relatively speaking, they're not that far away. I mean, like, from Tucson, you're 45 minutes an hour to, you know, probably 50 to 60 vineyards between the Wilcox wine region and the Sonoyta Elgin wine region. And then from Phoenix Sky Harbor, Scottsdale area. Well, one, it's interesting the Arizona Wine Growers Association, which I think is, anyone who's visiting Arizona or even who lives here should probably visit that website. It's azwinegrowersassociation.com.
hmm
They feature as one of the wine regions, the Scottsdale Wine Trail. And I thought that was pretty cool
Oh, that's
because
interesting. Yeah.
here you are, a lot of folks come into Scottsdale and North Phoenix for conventions, conferences, especially, non-summer months. And, so here's an introduction to 7 or 8 Arizona vineyards that have tasting rooms in Scottsdale, which is really smart, right? But then you could be there in an hour to the actual
To the
vineyard.
actual vineyard. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's, that's even the cooler part. Um, and but I think what we're starting to see is a cluster, everyone's saying, okay, wait a second, there's enough visitation here
Right.
that we can build wine tasting rooms that aren't even attached to our vineyard, and they will provide enough revenue and cash flow to sustain themselves.
Right.
Where normally you would see that only
As
on
an
the
extension.
vineyard,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
As an
Like,
extension
I
of vineyard.
mean, you're coming to visit us. We're giving you this nice place to hang out, chill, and have some, taste some wines. But now, I mean, if you go, I'm excited to go to Cottonwood, even though I don't make it up to Northern Arizona as much as I used to. But I mean, I've just, just looking at the map of Cottonwood,
Yeah,
it's
I know
just
it's
wine tasting room, wine tasting room, wine tasting room. I think, the lodging is definitely a challenge. You know, to your point, you meant, I have the property in Sonoyta,
well,
and
let's just plug it real quick because we
yeah,
need to like where you go down the Snort is really there's not a lot of places to stay.
I mean,
So
there's like 12 hotel rooms in the whole
right,
region,
in the whole region.
so,
So
and
where's your
it's a charming little hotel, but man, you're screwed if you're trying to get a hotel room.
right?
So what happens is most folks stay in like Tucson
Yeah.
or even Sierra Vista, which is a little
Mhm.
further out, but Tucson primarily. And then there's just these wine tours that come pick them up from their
Yes, right.
hotel in
Yeah.
Tucson and shuttle them around all the vineyards. And that's great. I think it's a great model. But, to really not have to deal with that transportation back and forth and to be able to relax, it's obviously Airbnb, VRBO is what's going to win there. From my experience in building this property in Sonoyta, is that it's kind of this like, don't talk about it too much. We get it. You want to help visitors come and visit these wineries, and that's why I did it.
Right.
Um, but it's such a beautiful place, and it's so calm and serene, and it's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
you're sitting out there, and it's like, ah. And so to me, it's fun because you can escape into this little enclave, just really chill out for a weekend or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. And and you go hiking. Like, where can you go have 50 vineyards in a very short small geographic area between Wilcox and Sonoyta Elgin, and go hiking in the Chiricahua Mountains, which the Chiricahuas rival the Grand Canyon,
Yeah.
and
They're as
they're
spectacular as it gets.
so
Yeah.
it's like, how cool is that? It's
That is super. Well, listen, we will in the show notes at least put a link into your spot down there. And I agree with you. And since you brought up hiking, I'm just going to pivot real quick. And as we head towards the conclusion of the podcast, I want to make sure we touch at least for a second on health and on famously coined the term blue zones, which we talk about frequently in those regions around the planet. That Dan Buettner wrote about that people live to be 100 years of age regularly. One of those regions is Sardinia. Um, and, to who knows which variable plays into the calculus that produces a year, 100-year long life. But wine seems to be in the mix in Sardinia. And I'm
oh
curious
yeah.
if there's any, can you draw any lines between Sardinian wines and Arizona wines? Because if drinking Arizona wine is going to help me live to be 100, that's just a double bonus. So
Chug it. No, yeah. So,
I swear, honey, it's medicine.
so, yes, absolutely. I think
Okay,
so. In the blue zones, uh, they talk a lot about Sardinia. It was the main focus was two things. From what I remember,
right.
wine, it's a red wine, and walking. So there
Yes,
are shepherds there, so they walk an average of 5 miles a day with their flocks. And it's not, there's no joggers there. They
right, right,
just
right. Yeah.
walk, right? And so that 5 miles of walking has a lot to do with it. Every night, and I mean every night, everyone gathers in town, and they have each person has a liter of red wine.
What?
Yeah. And that is the when they dove into the red wine there, the red wine, the grapes that are produced in Sardinia, it's a very hot climate, very similar to where we live.
Right.
And as a result, and it doesn't get a lot of water,
Okay.
rain, it gets more rainfall than probably the Sonoran Desert, but relatively speaking, it's a water starved
Okay.
island. And as a result, the grapes on those skins grow really thick. And
Right.
that's like, the secret sauce for winemakers is, especially red wine, is thick skin.
Yeah.
And so fast forward here to what we've learned here about Arizona wines is, and talking to Phil Asmundson especially, is the soil and the water amount of water that we get naturally versus through rainfall versus water that we bring down from the mountains. He has obviously a phenomenal system that we need to talk to him about with watering, but the the thickness of the skin here is, very similar to what they have in Sardinia. So that produces an incredible flavor, great tannins, and then the flavonoids that, are linked to, our health and longevity.
Yeah.
So I think that mixture, I think it's important. You got to have the two things.
Y-
So you do a little hiking and you do a
Right.
little drinking with
I like,
wine.
well, let me remind you of a detail about Sardinia in that there was a relationship to the concentration of centenarians, people who lived to be over 100, and the height of or the altitude of the town. And so people who lived at higher elevation, but it might not be what you think. What it was is all of that walking with the extra grade seemed to
Mm.
produce a stronger, healthier person. It gave him a little more resilience. Well, listen, it's it's time for me to go have a glass of wine. So I'll tell you that right now. Like,
Hey,
and
I'm with you. I got my blood work today.
how'd you
My
come out?
my I don't know yet,
Oh, you
but
got
I
it
know
done
I
today.
can have a glass of wine tonight.
Okay, excellent. We're going to talk. I mean, this is an important part of agriculture. It's an important part of Arizona agriculture. So we're going to come back and visit this, and we will have people on who are doing what we're talking about. Well, surely Phil and Kim will visit us. Hopefully, James. We'll get people from Arizona who are doing the work and talk to them. I love the connection of artistry and science. I mean, these are both artists and science. They're building beautiful things, delicious things, but they're technically complex structures. These farms in the desert require a very careful set of mechanisms that have to all work in harmony. When I was at Phil and Kim's place, watching how it all kind of came together and all that it was so fun. It was such a visual symphony of like really fun things to look at. I don't know. I just enjoyed it. So this will be an important part of what we talk about in the virtuous cycle of you grow the right things, produce the right things. It has the right outcomes for both the person consuming it and the person making it. How that relates to health, and how kind of doing the right things always end up everybody winning.
Well, Pete, I want to you brought up art, and one of the things I really it's a funny anecdote, and I can be a little bit of a hoarder, but I'm not, I've always wanted to collect wines and
Right,
have a wine cellar. I don't have one,
right.
maybe someday. But so I'm always nervous to keep wines for too long, especially if I paid a good amount of money for them. For me, a good amount of money is like 50, $60,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So James at Rune Wines, Runes, Rune Wines, um, he has artwork on his
Yes,
varietals, and
yes,
each vintage every year, it's a continuation of that story.
yes,
And the Rune label has these really cool stories of conquistadors and Vikings.
yes.
And then what I was really impressed by, and this is the number one gift I sent out to Christmas to non-Arizonans. So I have a lot of colleagues in Kansas, for instance.
Right,
I ship them Rune wines, right from Rune. It's really easy to order online
right.
because I know they have sellers, some of the folks I send to, and these are collector's
Oh,
items.
without a doubt. Yeah,
So
yeah.
he has a label now called Brigand, and it's been out for a few years, and they're very good wines. They're a lower price point than the Rune
Right,
label,
right.
but these are cowboy Wild West stories.
Yeah.
And it's really, really phenomenal. So I have, if you look in my little bar,
Right.
you can't even put any more bottles in there because I've
Uh,
saved all the
you saved the
bottles.
Rune, yeah.
Now they have no wine left in them.
Well,
But
yeah, we've done a dinner or two with James's wines, and I one of the meaning that we had a project years ago, Oren and I, where we did these incredible dinners, and we involved all kinds of different folks. We'll tell those stories at different time, but the ones we did with James, that was my exposure to his brand and to his product. The wine was amazing, but I was like, these are the coolest wine bottles I may have ever seen.
oh
I
yeah.
mean, and the fact that they're not just kind of for beauty's sake, that they're a narrative that kind of continues year over year. I thought was,
Yes.
just brilliant stuff.
The type of thought he's put into that, it's almost like it'll be fun to talk to him as an entrepreneur, not
Right.
just as a winemaker, because
Yes.
you
Yes.
know, you have to have extraordinary confidence
Yes. Yes. Right.
to focus on that, right?
I
Like you
agree. I agree.
most people would just be like, F the label. I just got to get this shit out there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but he really touched on something there. I think that's very special. And I think it speaks to his confidence as a not just a winemaker, but as an entrepreneur. And he's doing, from everything I could tell, he's doing extraordinarily well.
Yeah. Man.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
Oren, another time we're going to talk about wine, I'm sure, in a lot of our conversations. But I'm
Yes.
glad we sort of laid down some of the groundwork for, hey, if you're in Arizona or visiting Arizona, there's a lot for you to learn here, and we're going to bring some of those voices into the picture, and that'll be exciting stuff to do. But for now, I'm going to crack one open, Oren. I'm going to go have a
Yes. And
quick
I'm
glass.
excited for our next week's episode.
Oh,
And
who's coming?
yeah.
Who do you got on tap for us?
Tim Peterson from Arizona
What?
Grass Raised
He,
Beef. Yeah.
he's going to make time for us?
Yeah, this guy is the rock star of beef. I mean, I've never had such great beef in my life,
Yeah.
and so I'm excited. And this guy is got the greatest stories ever. We may want to block an extra few minutes for Tim.
We're going to need Tim more than once,
He
but
I've sat in a car with him going through cattle country with him in a
right,
truck, and when I tell you this guy, he knows every inch of this state. And
right.
when I am not kidding.
I,
And he knows what happened there to last year and 200, 300, 400 years ago.
he knows all the stories.
This
All
dude
right,
knows his
don't yeah.
stuff.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, listen. Who knows when someone might be listening to this in the future, and that's a episode in the past for you. But if you're listening uh currently, it's around August 15-ish. Then next week we're going to have Mr. Tim Peterson, and that's going to be awesome. Oren, thanks for a great conversation, and we'll talk again next week.
All right, Pete. Take care. Thank you.